talk of childhood damage or childhood wounds, as you said, we're talking of two predominant areas. The things that needed to get done and were not done. So because we are dependent, everything that our caregivers say to us and do with us becomes like a default. This is how the world is. I can't hurt the other person, then I can hurt myself by over drinking, or because we want control. We want things to be in our control, because if they go out of control, then it's going to get very tough. Literally, the term in Hindi, they say, phail gaya, means it's not consolidated and all neatly frozen. It's spreading, and my God, how am I going to handle it?
So we're back for the second episode with Meena. So, carrying on from our previous conversation with Meena, where we talked a lot about childhood conditioning and patterns, and in case you haven't seen it yet, you should check out the link to the previous episode. What is inner child healing all about? So we'd love to talk about all of those in great detail today, Meena. I'm so glad to have you again.
Thank you so much, Kritika. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and talk about my favorite things to talk about.
Amazing. Can't wait. So yes, Meena, can you shed some light on, what is childhood conditioning, right? Like, how does that make up our responses in present day?
Mm-hmm. So let's go to, day one of anybody's life, right? It's about coming into this world and seeing a new set of faces. Okay, what do we have? We have 5 sense organs. We see, we hear, we smell, we touch, right? And we taste. And that's on the physiological side. And then we are picking up a plethora of messages. Right from then, we don't have language, but then there's sounds, there's all of these stimuli around us. And from that day, our journey begins. Okay, so let's say somebody comes into coaching or therapy in their 20s or 30s or 40s, irrespective. There is those many years that they have spent on this planet, of which a significant part is childhood.
Right.
And why is that? One of the very important things, we need to see, which we forget. Like all of us now, we have jobs and we drive cars and we travel to different countries and, we raise kids and so we've forgotten who we were. We needed somebody to literally clean us up, right? Wipe our bottoms, pardon me. Okay. So, childhood is characterized by dependence. The human baby is the most dependent among all species, right? You've seen in National Geographic, those giraffes get up in about 15-20 minutes after they're born, right? We take about 11 months to a year to start walking.
Right.
So human beings are dependent on their caregivers. We would die if somebody didn't give us food and a roof above our head, keep us warm, clean. Okay, so because we are dependent, everything that our caregivers say to us and do with us becomes like a default. This is how the world is. They are not even messages. They are the truth for us, because we don't see what's happening in another baby's house or in another. I'm going to use the terms we use in inner child healing, the different stages. Another infant's house or another toddler's house or another preschooler's house. You think this is how the world operates. This is how moms are. This is how dads are. And somehow for us to operate, we need to believe that this is all fine and this is how it's supposed to be. Because that's a given. And then we have good days and bad days, and we have coughs and colds, and we have, then one day they leave us in preschool and we are like howling, like what's going to happen of us.
Right. And I like how you said that, we are actually dependent on our caregivers.
Yes.
And what's important to note is we're not just dependent for our physical needs. I think that a lot of parents and a lot of caregivers are very cognizant and very fully provide, but we're also dependent on our caregivers for our emotional needs. I think that that's not something that we were ready for as a society before the pandemic, I believe.
Awesome, you brought that up. That's really, really, really so cool. We did not realize, first of all, that emotion is not something that that we need to run away from. Most people think emotions are difficult, they're uncomfortable, they surface at the wrong time. And so because if I've been brought up in an environment where people don't have breakdowns, okay, people don't express feelings to each other, or they don't, like, even a raised voice is not allowed because it's disrespectful. Let's just see, which is how unique, the conditioning of each home and each family is. And they're coming from the way they were raised, the parents.
Right.
Okay. And so when we talk of childhood damage or childhood wounds, as you said, we're talking of two predominant areas. The things that needed to get done and were not done, those constitute neglect. And the things that should not have been done and they got done, which is all about abuse, right? And so between neglect and abuse, I don't think, as I work with people in their 20s or 30s or 40s, I don't think they know that whatever happened, whatever played out in their childhood years was sometimes neglectful and sometimes even abusive.
Yeah. And like when you said that we pick up things, right? Like, where there were no breakdowns. Like a house where feelings are not talked about, or where there are no breakdowns, even that's a message to, children, I
Yes.
believe. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Right.
This is like an uncomfortable part that should just go away. So if you are tearing up, you should just find a quiet corner to quickly maybe wash your face and come out. It cannot be seen. So psychotherapists talk about the no feel rule, the no talk rule. Like, you do not have permission to feel your feelings, you don't have permission to talk. If we've heard cliches like children should be seen and not heard. All of this comes from ways in which, and why did they have these rules? By the way, it's very interesting. They had these rules because people like to be in control, and that's also a very human thing. So if I'm walking with my child in the shopping aisle and he wants strawberry, what are they called? Not chocos, what's the other thing? Let's say a sugary strawberry flavored cereal, okay? And my child starts to throw a tantrum. It's so uncomfortable, okay? And I get all embarrassed thinking, what are they going to think about me? Is this how I've raised my child? So I get uncomfortable, and then maybe I say something very sharp, or I quickly maybe take some action to stop my child behaving the way he is, because we want control. We want things to be in our control, because if they go out of control, then it's going to get very tough. Literally, the term in Hindi, they say, phail gaya, means it's not consolidated and all neatly frozen. It's spreading, and my God, how am I going to handle it?
Yeah. And when you said rules, I can think of, like, culturally in India we have that rule, कि बड़ों के बीच में जो नहीं बोलना है.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
like that's, I think, this violation of people's voice in general very early on.
Yes. बड़ों के सामने नहीं बोलना है, and then as they grow up, that translates to age equals wisdom, which I'm so happy that young people today are challenging. That age does not equal wisdom anymore. And it's taken time, it's taken hard work, and yet it's so important, because I spent 20 more years than you on this planet does not necessarily mean that I've got my life all figured and sorted and that you have to listen to me.
So, like, when we say patterns, so a lot of self-sabotaging patterns have been acknowledged by people, whether it is, I think, I can speak for my generation. A lot of people say that I'm commitment phobic. That's a pattern.
Yes.
And I think that's a major self-sabotage to the world, or the virtue of being in a relationship. How do we pick up self-sabotaging patterns?
Okay. So if I can't hurt the other, then I'll hurt myself, because I've got to hurt somebody. That's a simplistic way of putting it, okay? In psychology, we talk of a term called passive aggression, okay?
Right.
So there's tons of aggression that's stored, and believe me, all of self-sabotage is nothing but passive aggression, right? It's like, I'm really angry at the world, but the way the world is structured, I cannot show my aggression. It's not okay for me. And when I'm saying the world, I know it's very general, but let's just say I have a colleague who constantly, takes credit for the work I'm doing. Something like that, okay, which happens I think most places of work a lot of the time. Okay, so I'm very angry that this person constantly, I do all the hard work and this person takes away my credit. I cannot speak up against that person because I have a pattern that anger must not come out, or that cooperation and teamwork and being nice is something that I've adopted as a pattern. So what do I do now? There's all this aggression. So I direct that aggression inwards to hurt me. That's what self-sabotage is. And therefore, it could be that something's going perfectly all right, and I do something at the last minute. Like this is a good time to talk about psychosomatic, right? Like our minds and bodies are connected. So on the day that I have to go make that final presentation and wow my bosses, I fall sick. Or for God's sake, so many women there, I get a really painful period. Then how do I go? Okay, so even that's very subtle self-sabotage. When we're talking of some really difficult stuff that we as a society, we as are facing today, about things like addiction, it's about I can't hurt the other person, then I can hurt myself by over drinking or over consuming nicotine or some drug, or by some and addiction is not limited to the things I consume. It's limited to addictive habits like I shop and I burn a hole in my pocket and I have no money to pay my rent or my next EMI. Okay,
Right.
So self-sabotage is about hurting me because I can't hurt the other. I cannot take action in a safe, socially or whatever appropriate way against the person who's harming me. So, but that energy of that harm has to be directed somewhere.
Correct.
And it's directed inwards. It's also called acting out and acting in behaviors. These are like you can't act out, so you act in.
And so typically, like when people are acting in, is it because there was no space for them to act out?
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
And like when you say addiction, right? Like I think it's not sometimes just substance. I see like a lot of people get addicted to, I don't know, drama.
Yeah.
Or addicted to
Perfect.
you right, like I mean,
Absolutely.
certain kind of relationships as well. Like what is that addiction about then? Like
The definition of addiction is doing something, being fully aware of its harmful consequences, and doing something addictively, obsessively, and compulsively, fully aware of its harmful consequences. Okay, so like the ones we commonly talk about are the addictions of ingestion, something you
Yeah.
ingest and put in your body. Okay,
Right.
the second one is behaviors,
Right.
which is shopping, gambling, so many nowadays, cluttering, okay, hoarding, cluttering, and a whole bunch of things that come under behavior. Gaming, device addiction, all of that is activity addiction. Okay,
Correct, yeah.
because you'll say, what's the harmful consequence? People are missing days at school or days at work, and they
Right.
continue to obsessively participate in whatever
I know
activity
people are like developing spasms in their
in their
hands and
thumbs.
fingers. Yeah,
Okay, so things you ingest, behavioral, and the third thing is being addicted to a certain emotion. For example, I don't know, it's not a very familiar term, but there's a term called rageaholic.
Rageaholic.
Yes. So people who are addicted to rage because, for the simple reason that emotion has been so much suppressed through their childhood and teen years, that when they fly into a rage and when they start to scream and throw things, they actually feel themselves. They actually come alive in a temper, when they are enraged. And so it becomes addictive to go into that, to do that drama. So these are addictions of emotions. Similarly, a lot of people, I mean, many people could be, let's say, addicted to sadness. So it's like I feel alive only when I'm crying. Now, while I don't want to give the wrong message, there's nothing wrong with crying. But if you have the need to induce yourself to keep crying just so that you feel alive, then that's an addiction to an emotion. The other thing you talked about was relationship addiction. It would again come in the umbrella of a behavior addiction. To constantly be in a particular type of relationship,
Right.
and a lot of the times it's that a relationship which is so difficult that I need to work twice as hard in order to keep that relationship going. That's the thing. The other thing is, a lot of the times, relationship, there could be so many different kinds of relationship addictions. Like the part where you get into an addiction, a relationship where you woo the other person and convince them to kind of be with you. And that's the exciting part. And then, you're familiar with each other. And then you'll find that the person wants to break up because they want to get into that cycle, because that's the fun part. And that's what you're addicted to. So relationship addictions have very, very different sides and different shades. Also, I must mention this, that to be addicted to sex is also a pathological addiction. It's like to be, when you say, oh, okay, is there such a thing as too much sex or too little sex? It's actually when a person is, objectifies another. That's the harmful consequence of it. You objectify another to get your sexual needs met, and no matter how much time in a day you spend having sex, it feels like it's not enough.
Got it. And you do a lot of work with the inner child healing, right? And so till what time are people receiving and absorbing messages as children? Like, is there a point after which that childhood conditioning stops? Like, is it 7? Is it 14? What is that age limit like?
So, very interesting. In transactional analysis, they talked about some of these very positive, very, very motivating, positive in the sense, messages to do something, okay? And those were those were called drivers. Like try hard is a driver, or be perfect is a driver, or so these are the messages, and there are don'ts, which are called injunctions, like don't talk, or don't feel, or don't belong, or don't ask for importance. Right? So that we say till about 7 years, a person's drivers and injunctions are in place. So what drives you is by 7, you know that these are my most important. Please others is a very important driver. And we found that as we're talking now a lot about people pleasing and the problems it creates. Earlier it was not there. Please others, meaning I need to please others for me to exist, for me to flourish and continue,
and for me to kind of just get included as well, right? Like, I think
absolutely, to get included, to belong, to be part of. So drivers and injunctions, by 7 it's done. But talking about inner child, so the way at least the program I do is structured is looking at the stages of the developmental stages, starting with infancy, which is like babyhood, then there's toddlerhood, then there's preschool years, school years, and adolescence. And adolescence, educational and developmental psychologists have put it like all the way up to 26.
Oh,
yeah,
wow, really?
Yeah.
26?
So till 26, based on brain development, and the messages are being passed. But let me tell you this interesting thing. By 7, if the drivers are already in place and the injunctions are already in place, it's going to be very difficult. It's as though I'm living my life saying, I know this is what is going to happen. So if this does not even happen, I am going to justify it and explain it to myself in a way that my belief holds true, not reality. Are you getting it?
Can you illustrate that with?
So if I am a pleaser, okay, right, and I live in a household where I've said that, oh, I'm so sweet, I will set the table before dinner at the age of 5 or 6 or whatever it is, right? And then I win brownie points. I mean, I win appreciation, love, from my caregivers, siblings, whatever. Let's say when I'm 8 years old, I have a teacher, a very principled, very, very motivated teacher who says to me, listen, beta, you don't have to, open the door for me when I'm walking in. My child mind will say, oh, so she's trying to introduce a contrary belief, okay? And my mind will try and find some fault in that relationship I have with that teacher. And say, she said to me that I don't need to open the door for her, but the other day I saw that, somebody offered to carry her bag and she gave them a hug. So you see, this doesn't work. So actually pleasing works. Because we become very selective about taking those data points which match our theory.
Right.
and our worldview. And so if we doesn't, then we just reject reality, right? What is denial, for instance? We tell somebody, oh, you're in denial that your boss is a jerk or that your marriage isn't working. What is denial? It means it's reality is staring me in the face, but I've convinced myself that no, it's sometimes, or it's not that bad.
So, Meena, so for somebody, who's not just struggling, right? Like sometimes, when you inertly know that something's not right, some things can be better. How does one choose, like, what kind of support or what kind of resources to turn to? Like, what is the way forward? Like, since you have, dabbled in a range of modalities, and I know
Right.
that, like, more than before being like a facilitator, you've always been like a very enthusiastic learner as
That's
well.
true, yes.
So where does one go? What can be like a start point, and how to pick somebody, like how to pick a coach who can like help you walk the path as well.
So it's very interesting, Kritika. It's like this when we experience, and we just now talked about the body, the mind, and consciousness itself and spirit. So when we're going through a problem, I think one of the best ways to look at, I mean, if it were possible to have one person who could take care of all three sides, that may or may not happen. And yet, for each person to be conscious that I need to bring all these three parts of myself into my healing. And which is why just doing one approach only might not be the answer. Also, a lot of these, which are run by huge groups and tend to sometimes even have certain, let's say, like a religious agenda. Okay, it can happen that a person gets very inspired and motivated to go on a path, and yet certain obvious issues go ignored. And I see some of that happening. So really, it's for each one to. I think if one of the core values is to be authentic with yourself, or to be honest with yourself, and say that what part of me, what part of my problems does this program or my interactions and sessions with this person, what part does it address, and what is going unnoticed.
Right. And it does not really like okay, so it does not really have to be a problem, right? It could be some elevation that people want in a particular relationship, or maybe in their career, or in like
It'll
maybe,
always be like that.
right.
See, where it'll always be with reference to something. Okay, so there's a context. Let's say I want to do better at work, and I want to be able to say, to communicate effectively or strongly or confidently, or I want to be more open about the skills that I bring to the table in this organization. What will help me do that? So I think an inquiry like that, an honest self-inquiry about what is it that I really need to resolve. Because you see, why I keep saying this, and honest, authentic, is that a lot of times, the work gets overshadowed by the personality of the person, whether it is in a group context or whether it's even in a one-on-one. And this is something that, I want to say to people who are looking for their coach, or who are trying to find a person they can work with. It's got nothing to do with the personality of the person that you choose to work with, but how you are feeling with them. Do you feel that you can honestly share what's going on in your life? Because if you are going to, there are these jokes about three people you don't lie to: your doctor, your lawyer, and your therapist. It's actually because if you have to posture and put up something in front of them, then that's not therapy or coaching at all.
Right.
So, which is why I keep harping, saying, you know what, are you comfortable? Or does this person in little ways? And for those of us that are, that are just new entering this field, in little ways, sometimes your own inner instinct tells you. And I'll say, don't ignore your inner instinct. It's usually very powerful. It's telling you, it's pointing you in the right direction, saying, if this is the way it was, a particular conversation went, and something didn't feel right, honor that voice which is saying something. Delve a little deeper, ask questions, You see, and again, asking questions is something we don't do a lot of because maybe it's not been encouraged, or we feel that we may be perceived as, we're being too demanding or too complaining and things like that. But I think till you're completely satisfied that you're happy to trust, and you move on. And therefore I also find that for in anybody's journey of bringing self-awareness and resolving concerns in their areas and in evolving psychologically and spiritually, there will be more than one person.
Yeah.
Which is why you talk to people who've journeyed from maybe group work to one-on-one work, from purely cognitive work, behavior therapy kind of work, to work that's based on personality, identity,
and to like alternative therapy.
to alternative therapies like hypnosis, like maybe working with consciousness, with energy and stuff like that.
Right.
So what are you ready for at what point of time?
That's important.
That's important.
And I think like I see a lot of practitioners now in the West include mindfulness
Yes.
practices in the work they do with their clients. And I think meditation has always been like a very Eastern tool as such, right?
Absolutely.
So it kind of like makes
Yes.
sense why
Yes.
it's kind of happening. I funny that you say honest and authentic, because I think that was one of the things that you kind of also shared, that a lot of people are not even authentic about how they're doing.
Yeah.
I am fine, I think, is the biggest lie that sometimes people we say to ourselves and to even like others.
Yes, yes. And I talked about this inner voice and this inner instinct because over a period of time, if I keep ignoring it, maybe it'll just go very, very, very quiet. Okay, and then it won't be heard. It's the loudest in a little child.
Right.
Okay, remember the emperor's new clothes? The one kid in the in the procession who says, "Oh, the emperor is not wearing any clothes." So we are born with that absolute transparent kind of honesty, saying, "No, it's not looking nice."
Right.
Or it's a cold day and I want to wear something warm, even though this dress is looking very pretty. Okay, but that honesty kind of comes down because we don't have permission to say things the way they are. And if that continues, then we just become people who spout pleasantries and what is socially appropriate and politically correct and all of that.
Right.
Yeah.
And not just I think not just socially appropriate, I think also what looks good on social media as well.
Wow, I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah. No, I think that's very serious. Something that we are facing now is this whole trend of what looks good on social media, and it's like living a parallel life on social media. So it could be that there's conflicts, there's all kinds of things, but then people actually will then suppress all of those tensions and conflicts and problems that they have to put up a brave face and to put up images or text which shows that they're doing really well. Right? And that nothing is wrong in their life, in their relationship, with their health. And so it's like they're living their life for an invisible audience. Okay, and so it's going to be that their own authenticity is going to be slowly stifled. Yeah.
And another thing that you mentioned was that a lot of people that you work with sometimes are very, very accomplished, right? From the outwardly,
Yes.
from all the social media parameters, right?
Yes.
They're very accomplished, and yet there is some amount of emptiness, right?
Yes.
There is there is a lack of meaning, I would say.
Absolutely. I want to talk about two things. It's so interesting you should bring this up. This is what we call the imposter syndrome, right? Like people in very good positions, leading this life that looks accomplished and that looks polished and that looks like everything is going just well. And sometimes they doubt their own capabilities because that's not what their own inner voice is telling them. And therefore they feel like an imposter. So that's something that's become like something that people bring up in therapy and talk about, saying, I don't feel like this whole thing is real. Right? And again, let's go back to the last episode where we talked about this inner child, because here, I'm sitting in this board meeting telling people, the fate of millions of dollars, and I feel like a little child who hasn't had enough time to brush their teeth properly. And as I'm smiling into the camera, I'm wondering if there's something stuck here. And the person sitting across me would be kind enough to tell me that, hey, something as simple as that. Right? So there's that little child who feels like, oh, there's too many people here. Or I haven't slept properly, so maybe I'll nod off if somebody rambles for too long. And we're not listening to that little child, right?
Right.
So that also again then makes me feel like an imposter, because this whole image of this successful, well put together person that I'm projecting is not real. It doesn't feel real to me. So people also act modest and they say, no, that wasn't me. And in fact, one of the real tests, like I ask people a lot of times, how do you respond to a compliment, right? Like if I tell you, Kritika, you're looking great in this dress.
Thank you, Meena.
Wonderful. Yeah. And a lot of times I get responses like, oh, really? There was nothing else and this was on the top of the shelf and I picked it up and I wore it. Or it's actually very old. Or I bought it at so much % sale. People, they justify looking nice, or they justify looking confident, because it's not okay to take the compliment for what it is and respond to it with just a thank you. Right? So giving a compliment is an art. Receiving it is also one.
So Meena, I know that you mix a lot of approaches, right? Like it's not like I will go to Meena and she will do only CBT or she will do only Reiki, right? Like I know for a fact that you mix a lot of approaches, which are also like a diverse set of approaches across Western ideologies as well as Eastern ideologies. I know you're here for a breathwork workshop, right?
Yes.
How do you see all these tools fitting together in your toolkit?
So when I get into a session, right, and I think the initial part is just about hearing the person out and what they are facing in terms of how their environment is responding to them and what is causing their distress. Okay, so like you mentioned, the behavior part of it, and that's so we're working from outside, saying how did this impact you, what came out, and then it's the emotional regulation part of it, which is about how comfortable are you identifying, acknowledging and expressing, say, anger or fear or any of these emotions, right? And then the moment we get into, therefore, which parts of your body are getting involved, whether you call it the Indian way or the Western way, there is certain instinctively certain things, like we feel it's actually all so similar that we feel fear in our upper abdomen, right. and you can say okay, you feel it in your solar plexus chakra, right? So it somehow comes together very nicely, whether it's that. And again, the gut feeling, yeah, or like butterflies in the stomach. So it's all so well related. And the other thing to be seen is, of course, I also work with people who are, whose psychological ailment has gotten diagnosed maybe as a psychiatric disorder, which is why when I say we're talking about mental health, we're talking about people who are, whose psychological issues have created chemical imbalances in their brain, and therefore they are on medication to regulate that, right? So that really is when we say mental health. Otherwise, we're more talking of emotional and behavioral health,
right? Correct.
In this case, right? And also, I will hear sometimes something like, people are into something like yoga or some kind of a breath work which is calculated to bring equilibrium into the body. I think it goes hand in hand, and with work which involves talking to a counselor or a coach, and having them understand you and guide you through to look within and see what are some of the pieces of that story that you could be missing out on.
Got it. I think meditation is a great practice to bring awareness, but finally you need to kind of snap out of it, and I think that's where you step in, working alongside people, correct?
Exactly. Meditation is about awareness, and when I scan my whole body and I say, okay, every morning I wake up with this sinking feeling in my stomach. Suppose that's a symptom, right? Or I wake up with throbbing temples and I have headaches very often. So then I see the connection between my ways of the person's ways of thinking, their attitudes, and then where their emotions are showing up in their body, and bring it all back together.
Got it. So do you use a lot of meditation in your own with your own clients as well?
I use what I'd like to call guided visualizations,
Got it.
and also understanding the body, and bringing focusing on finding emotions in different parts of the body and working on them, breathing into them,
Got it.
and releasing them. Again, EFT is another technique,
Yeah.
right? It's all about you're tapping different points, and you're basically acknowledging the emotion, and you're also creating an openness for embracing the part of you that is going through that emotion instead of denying it and pushing it
Right.
aside.
And it's
Yeah.
like, I mean, for me, I think I've discovered it to be one of the most healthiest ways to,
Yes.
process my emotions as such. Right?
Absolutely.
Like, because it's not like I don't feel anger, but it's just easier to tap it out rather than lash out on someone.
Yes. Really, yes.
Perfect. Okay. I actually want to dive into the difference or the domains of mental, emotional, and spiritual health. And the reason I'm asking you is because, I know that apart from, having a master's in counseling psychology and, practicing transactional analysis, which is, such a Western modality, you're also a Reiki practitioner.
That's right.
Right? And, in our chats you've kind of shared about there is a whole intersection of spirituality, and I would love to know what your how you see it, and if that's something that you can share more about as well.
Sure. So I think what we're trying to talk about is the components of the body, the mind, and spirit. You can say spirit or you can say soul, and so really looking at how we heal certain things, which is the things that are creating mental blocks, and the things that we resolve cognitively through coaching, through behavior modification, and then emotional regulation. The things that we're looking at the body level through even techniques like neuro-linguistic programming, even when we're doing things like hypnosis, where we're saying, where in the body are you feeling this emotion? Because emotion is felt in the body, right? So mind and body. And really, when we're saying soul or spirit, instead of making it all confusing and something that is very vague, I'd say it's that part of you that knows instinctively what is your way forward.
I think for anyone to kind of keep walking through the tunnel, there has to be some light at the end of the tunnel, right?
Yes.
Like, what is the light at the end of the tunnel of healing childhood trauma? Because it's not comfortable, right? It's not. Sometimes it requires even standing up to parents. Sometimes it requires holding people to account. It requires stepping out of your own comfort zone, being another way. Like, you now don't overnight stop being like a people
Yes.
pleaser. You stop pleasing people, and that really pisses people off, right?
Yes.
So how does how does life look like at the end of the other tunnel?
Wow. So let's just look at one thing, which is that this whole thing is a process and it's going to take time,
Yeah.
right? And yet you're saying, what is it at the end of the tunnel? And since you use the metaphor of walking through a dark tunnel and coming out, I'm going to use another walking metaphor, which is that let's just say you have this long walk, and there's this tiny pebble in your shoe. And that every time you take a step, that pebble's poking the sole of your foot and it's hurting. Think of your unresolved childhood trauma as that little pebble. Okay? So it's like you're trying to walk and you're trying to maybe sprint, jog, whatever. Okay? But this little pebble is poking you again and again and again. So what inner child work really, if I were to really simplify it, is for you to sit down, take the shoe off, shake that stone out, and put your shoe back again. Okay? There's a great word that a person who's worked extensively on inner child healing, his name is Dr. John Bradshaw. He says that a wounded inner child contaminates the life of an adult. Like all of us are living life as adults, right? We go to work, we file taxes, we drive cars,
Right.
we get married, we raise families, and imagine there's one part of us that we regress to, and we behave like a tantrum throwing child or like an unreasonable toddler, and it completely ruins what this responsible, well put together adult is trying to do. So, would you not take care of that child? First, okay, pamper, take care, honor what that child wants so that you can live your life. You can live your life to your truest potential by doing all of these things. So, in one word, if I were to say, is to adult, and again, we're all talking of adulting a lot these days.
Right.
So, to really adult doesn't mean to be old enough to vote, you know, or to be old enough to walk into a bar and order a drink or to get married to somebody, but really to live and act and feel your age without being dragged into some behavior that you yourself regret because there's some unfinished business left with childhood. That's what really happens. So the light is a life where how you feel and who you are and your chronological age and your mental and intellectual and emotional age, everything matches and is synchronous, and it helps you to realize your fullest potential.
Amazing. Thanks so much for putting it that way, actually.
Thank you.
And I love the fact that you put it intellectual, emotional, and like mental and physical age, right? Like that's very, very articulate. This has been wonderful, Meena. Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much for sharing all that you did. I'm really hoping that we get to see more of you and we get to do more of these conversations in person and bring it to the listeners of the Brightlife podcast.
My pleasure. Always.
Thanks so much. All right. Okay. Thank you.